Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 13. Heather. It took me 4 years to build Victor Mercer into the consultant he became. It took him 43 seconds to destroy everything we'd built together. I remember very well the moment I realized my dear colleague intended to fire me. I was in the conference room on the 38th floor of our Tribeca office, watching him shake hands with a client I had brought to the company. This client was someone he had lost because of the strategies I had taught him. The managing partner was standing next to him, smiling as if they had reached an agreement. And they had. The agreement was to fire me. But here's what Victor didn't know when he walked into that boardroom expecting my humiliation. I had documentation of every single conversation, every forwarded email, every backdated document he'd created to make it look like my work was his. 4 years of mentorship had taught him almost everything about consulting. Almost. I never taught him that I kept receipts. Here's what happened. 7 years ago, I joined Whitmore Strategic Partners as a senior associate. The firm occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Tribeca, the kind of building where the elevators had touch screens and the lobby smelled like money and ambition. Within 2 years, I'd made principal consultant the youngest in the firm's history. My specialty was healthcare transformation. I helped hospital systems redesign their operations, cut waste without cutting care, and navigate the Byzantine regulations that kept most consultants away from the industry entirely. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine. I'd built my reputation on being the person clients called when every other firm had failed. The office had a special energy in the early hours of the morning. At 6 a.m., I arrived with a cup of coffee in hand and watched the sun rise over the Manhattan skyline from windows more expensive than my first car. The cleaning staff waved to me in greeting. There was an unspoken agreement among us early risers who arrived before the building woke up. There's something about sharing these quiet hours that creates a special bond. By my 3rd year, I was managing a portfolio worth $47 million in annual billings. The partners noticed. Richard Calloway, the managing partner, started inviting me to client dinners, industry conferences, the kinds of events where decisions got made over whiskey and handshakes. His office was on the corner of the 38th floor, with views of both rivers and a collection of tombstones from deals he'd closed over 40 years. "You're going places, Heather," he told me once, his hand on my shoulder in that proprietary way older executives have. "Just keep your head down and deliver." I kept my head down. I delivered. And when HR asked me to mentor a new hire fresh from business school, I said yes without hesitation. I remembered what it was like to be new, to feel like everyone else had a playbook you hadn't received. Someone had helped me learn the unwritten rules. Now it was my turn to pay that forward. What I didn't know then was that this single decision would cost me nearly everything I'd built. Trust violation doesn't announce itself. It arrives dressed as opportunity. Victor Mercer arrived at Whitmore with credentials that sparkled: Columbia MBA, internships at McKinsey and Bain, a reference letter from a senator's chief of staff. He was smart, hungry, and completely unprepared for the reality of healthcare consulting. His first week, he wore expensive Italian loafers that clicked against the marble lobby floor like a metronome. By his 2nd week, he'd switched to broken in Oxfords. Small adaptation, but I noticed. He was paying attention to what worked in this environment. That should have been my first warning. I don't understand why these hospital administrators won't just implement the changes, he complained after his first client meeting. We were sitting in my office, the city spread out behind us like a promise of everything he could achieve. "The data clearly shows, the data doesn't run hospitals," I said. "People do. Scared people who have been burned by consultants before, who have watched their colleagues get laid off after efficiency improvements, who have seen quality metrics weaponized against frontline workers. Your job isn't to be right. Your job is to make them believe being right is their idea." I remember the way he looked at me then, not with understanding, but with something more calculating, like he was filing the information away for future use. At the time, I thought that was admirable. Analytical. Now I recognize it as something else entirely. I taught him everything: how to read a room full of hospital executives, noting who deferred to whom, who interrupted, who stayed silent until their opinion was directly solicited, how to structure a presentation so the CFO and the chief medical officer both felt heard, even when their priorities were diametrically opposed, how to deliver bad news without making enemies, framing failures as learning opportunities and budget overruns as strategic investments. We spent countless hours in my office, whiteboarding strategies, rehearsing presentations, dissecting meetings after the fact. I showed him the client files, the relationship maps, the subtle indicators that told you when a deal was about to close or fall apart. He absorbed everything like a sponge. Most importantly, I taught him to document every recommendation in writing, so when things went wrong, and things always went wrong, you had proof you'd warned them. Healthcare systems are litigation magnets. Paper trails aren't paranoia, they're survival. Always get it in email, I told him. Verbal agreements vanish when budgets get tight. Someone will misremember. Someone will deny. The only thing that survives institutional memory loss is documentation. He took notes. He asked questions. He stayed late and arrived early, and slowly, incrementally, became competent. Then good. Then genuinely talented. I was proud of him. That's the part that still hurts. I genuinely believed I was building something meaningful, a professional relationship built on mentorship and mutual respect. I thought he felt the same way. I was so wrong. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I chose to ignore. But hindsight is a cruel teacher. By his second year, Victor was handling his own small accounts community hospitals, rural health clinics, the clients that didn't generate enough revenue for partner attention, but still needed competent service. By his third year, he was sitting in on my major client meetings, absorbing the relationships I'd spent years cultivating. I introduced him to Gregory Holt, the CEO of Northeast Regional Health, my biggest client. Gregory was a former cardiac surgeon who'd somehow ended up running a 12-hospital system spanning 3 states. He communicated almost exclusively in sports metaphors and profanity, had no patience for consultants who couldn't keep up with his rapid-fire decision-making, and trusted me with problems he wouldn't share with his own board. "This is Victor," I told him at our first joint meeting. "He's going to be shadowing me for the next few months. Best young consultant I've worked with." Gregory shook his hand, sized him up the way surgeons do. "You as good as Heather says?" "I'm learning from the best," Victor said. Smooth. Appropriate. Exactly what I would have coached him to say. I vouched for his capabilities to the intake committee at Mount Sinai. I gave him credit in meetings when he deserved it, and sometimes when he didn't, because that's what mentors do. You elevate your people, you create opportunities. You build them up so they can eventually surpass you. "You're basically his fairy godmother," my colleague Eric Fontaine said one lunch, watching Victor command a room full of hospital executives in a presentation he'd built entirely on his own. "That used to be you up there." "That's the point," I said. "You build people up. That's how firms grow. That's how careers grow. I want him to be better than me." Eric gave me a look I didn't understand at the time. Something cautious. Almost pitying. Just make sure he wants the same thing. What I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that Victor wasn't learning to be a consultant. He was learning to be me. Specifically, he was learning to replace me. The pattern of deception began so quietly I almost missed it. The first sign of betrayal came on a Tuesday in October. I was preparing for a presentation to Northeast Regional Health's Board of Directors, the most important meeting of my year. This was the account that had made my career. A 5-year relationship worth $12 million in annual fees. Gregory Holt and I had worked together through 2 CEO transitions, a Medicare audit, and a financial crisis that nearly bankrupted half the hospitals in the system. Our professional relationship had almost turned into friendship. He had met my husband at a conference dinner. I knew he was pressuring his daughter to follow in his footsteps and study medicine. We shared information with each other based on trust that would never come up in official communication. It takes years for that kind of trust to develop, but I would soon learn that it can disappear in an instant. I wish someone had warned me, but would I have listened? Probably not. Victor knocked on my office door. Hey, quick question about the Northeast deck. Sure, what's up? I was thinking about the slide on surgical throughput. The data's a little dated. Their Q2 numbers came in last week. Want me to update it? That would be great. Thanks, Victor. He smiled. That smile. I can still see it, perfectly warm, helpful, completely authentic looking. Of course. Oh, and Gregory called while you were in with Richard. Something about moving the board meeting up. I told him I'd have you call back. My stomach tightened. Wait, what? Moving it up to when? He didn't say exactly, but don't worry, I took good notes. I called Gregory immediately. His assistant said he was in surgery observation and couldn't be disturbed. I tried twice more that day. No answer. His calendar showed him booked solid. The next morning, I learned the board meeting had been moved to Thursday 2 days away, and that Victor had already confirmed attendance on behalf of Whitmore Strategic Partners. Not me specifically. The firm. I figured you'd want maximum flexibility, he said when I confronted him, his expression perfectly innocent. In case you needed to send someone else. Why would I send someone else to my own client meeting? He shrugged. You've been so busy lately. I just wanted to help. I should have recognized it then. The way he'd inserted himself into the communication chain. The way he'd made himself indispensable to a client relationship I'd built from nothing. The way he'd positioned himself as my backup without ever being asked. But I was too busy trusting him to see what he was doing. Trust is professional, I tell people now. But back then, I hadn't learned that lesson yet. Deceptive behavior accelerated in the following weeks. At first, these were small things I didn't pay much attention to. Meetings I wasn't invited to, emails I was mysteriously excluded from, phone calls made to clients without my knowledge. Each incident could be explained separately. Scheduling conflicts, administrative errors, simple mistakes. Together, they formed something much more deliberate. Workplace sabotage dressed as helpfulness. A pattern of deception hidden inside professional courtesy. He was playing chess while I was still setting up the board. I started paying attention. I started saving everything. I started documenting the gaps in my communication chains, the meetings that happened without me, the conversations I was excluded from. It wasn't suspicion, yet more like professional instinct. Something felt wrong, even if I couldn't name it. Richard wants to see you, Eric told me one morning, his face carefully neutral. Conference Room B. Conference Room B was where they did terminations. Everyone in the firm knew that. It was on the north side of the building, windowless, with a table too small for productive meetings and chairs designed to be uncomfortable. No one ever got good news in Conference Room B. I walked in expecting the worst. Instead, I found Richard Calloway surrounded by printouts, his face flushed with what I initially read as anger. Sit down, Heather. I sat. I've been getting some concerning reports. He slid a document across the table. This is a complaint from Northeast Regional Health. They're saying deliverables have been late, communication has been poor, and they're questioning whether you're still committed to the account. I picked up the document. Gregory Holt's signature was at the bottom, but the language didn't sound like him. It was too formal, too corporate. Gregory was a surgeon who'd accidentally become an executive. He communicated in bullet points and profanity, not phrases like diminished engagement and reduced responsiveness. This isn't right, I said. I talked to Gregory last week. He said the project was on track. According to Victor, Gregory has been expressing concerns for months. He brought it to my attention after the situation became untenable. The words hit me like ice water. According to Victor, he protected you, Heather. He answered the customer calls you didn't respond to and fixed the presentations you delivered late. He didn't want to say anything out of professional loyalty and similar reasons, but when the relationship with the customer started to deteriorate, he felt he had no other choice. I felt a chill in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. Every meeting I missed, every email I missed, every conversation held without me, it wasn't incompetence. It was a strategy I had unknowingly helped him perfect. Richard, I need to show you something. The decision's already been made. We're transitioning Northeast Regional to Victor's portfolio. You'll retain your other accounts, but I'd strongly suggest using this as a wake-up call. Just look at my documentation. Documentation? He actually laughed. Victor's the one with documentation. Emails, calendar records, client communications. Everything shows you've been checked out for months. I don't know what's going on in your personal life, Heather, but it's affecting your work. I stared at him, and if I can prove he's lying, his expression shifted just slightly. Then I'd suggest you do that quickly, because right now the evidence supports his version of events. I returned to my office and closed the door. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort I was making not to scream. 4 years. For 4 years, I taught him, protected him, and supported him. For 4 years, I worked late into the night and got up early in the morning, sharing my customer relationships and professional knowledge with him and believing in his potential. And this is how he rewarded my professional trust. I couldn't believe he could do this. But unfortunately, it was a painful reality. If you've had this kind of experience, you surely know this feeling. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how long it had been happening right under my nose. I started digging. The betrayal was even more comprehensive than I'd imagined. I was angry at myself for not noticing all of this sooner. For over a year, Victor had been systematically preparing a case against me. He had forwarded emails from clients to Richard with his own comments, always portraying himself as the responsible party. He had also portrayed me as a mentor who no longer cared about him. By backdating some items in the calendar, he showed meetings that he claimed I had missed, even though these meetings had never actually been scheduled. He even created a paper trail implying that I had delegated a very important task to him and then took credit for the results myself. Can you believe the effort he put into all this? 18 months of careful planning to destroy someone who had done nothing but help him succeed. The forged complaint with Gregory's signature was just the final piece. He drafted it himself, gotten Gregory's assistant to print it on company letterhead for filing purposes, and collected a digital signature he'd harvested from a routine authorization form months earlier. It was professional sabotage executed with surgical precision, 18 months of systematic evidence fabrication, and he'd learned every technique from me. But Victor had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was as careless as he'd portrayed me to be. I wasn't. During my 7 years working at Whitmore, I developed a system. Every email received from customers was saved in a folder on Google Drive, sorted by date, account, and subject. After every phone call with a client, a written summary was prepared. All these summaries, including those from meetings, were sent to the relevant parties. This wasn't paranoia, it was simply a good consulting system that made my work life easier. I taught him the same system. Now it was evidence. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing my counter case. It was difficult not only mentally, but also emotionally. I can say the emotional part was even harder, but it couldn't stop me from doing what I had to do. Original emails with unaltered timestamps, calendar entries showing I'd attended meetings Victor claimed I'd missed. Client testimonials including a video message from Gregory Holt himself, horrified to learn his signature had been used on a complaint he'd never written. Watching him learn the truth was almost as painful as discovering it myself. "Heather, what the hell is going on?" Gregory asked when I called him directly, bypassing Victor entirely. His voice was sharp with confusion and something else anger. I realized, not at me, at the situation. "Victor told me you were transitioning off the account, said you'd recommended him personally." "Gregory, I never said that. I never recommended anything of the kind." Silence on the line. Then, he showed me an email from you. "Forward it to me, right now." He did, and that's exactly what he did. I have to give him credit. The email was a masterpiece of forgery. Technically, it wasn't fake because it was sent from my account, but it had been carefully edited and taken out of context, so it said something I never wanted to say. I'd written, "Victor would be excellent backup if I'm ever unavailable." He'd forwarded it with strategic ellipses as "I recommend Victor, excellent for this account." What he did was beyond evil. "Gregory, I need you to do something for me. I need you to put in writing your own words, your own document what our working relationship has actually been like. Not what Victor told you, what you've experienced. Heather, if what you're saying is true, I have documentation, I have everything, but I need witnesses. I need people willing to say what they saw. He agreed without hesitation. Our professional relationship had been built on 5 years of mutual accountability. He wasn't about to abandon that now. You tell me what you need, I'll make it happen. So did 11 other clients. So did Eric Fontaine and 3 other colleagues who'd noticed Victor's behavior but hadn't known what to make of it. 34 people in total were willing to provide statements supporting my account of events. Gathering this evidence was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. In every conversation, I had to explain the betrayal, to admit that someone I trusted, someone I held closest to me, had abused that trust. Each witness I approached was another person who learned that my judgment, my famous judgment that clients paid premium rates for, had failed me with the person closest to my work. Armed with evidence, I requested a meeting with the firm's board of directors. Richard tried to block it. This is a personnel matter. The board doesn't get involved in personnel matters. It's not a personnel matter, I told him. It's fraud, document fraud, client relationship misrepresentation, and potential violations of our fiduciary agreements. The board needs to see this before Northeast Regional's lawyers do. His face went pale. You're threatening the firm? I'm protecting the firm from him, and from you if you keep covering for him. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. My sleep had been irregular and restless for some time, but that weekend I barely slept at all. I went over my documentation again and again, looking for holes Victor might exploit. I found nothing. I felt like I was in a vicious cycle, but anxiety is a way of creating doubt. Every worst-case scenario played on repeat in my mind like a broken record. What if they believed him? What if professional loyalty meant nothing against his polished presentation? What if I'd missed something? My husband found me at 3 a.m, surrounded by printouts on the kitchen table. You've already won, he said quietly. You have the evidence. You have the witnesses. Stop torturing yourself. I trained him, I said. I taught him everything he used to do this. What does that say about me? It says you're a good teacher. What he chose to do with that knowledge says something about him. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered. It still does sometimes. I suppose it's not easy to get over this kind of experience. Some wounds heal. Others just teach you to live with the scar. The meeting was held in the main boardroom on the 38th floor, the same room where I'd won my biggest accounts, where I'd been promoted to principal consultant, where I'd introduced Victor to his first major client. Now it would decide both our futures. 7 members of the board of directors, Richard, Victor, and I attended the meeting. Victor was dressed smartly, a conservative blue suit, an expensive watch symbolizing professional reliability. He looked like someone who would never betray a colleague he had worked with for 4 years, who would never forge a document, someone trustworthy. He looked like what I'd built him to be, actually. The version of me he'd been constructing for his own purposes. Let's keep this efficient, said Patricia Okonkwo, the board chair. She was a former federal prosecutor who transitioned to corporate law, and she had no patience for drama. We have 2 conflicting narratives and a major client relationship at stake. Heather, you requested this meeting. Make your case. I'd prepared a presentation, 62 slides documenting the pattern of deception, the altered emails, the backdated calendars, the fabricated complaint with Gregory Holt's forged signature. I had witness statements from 34 people, including 12 clients, describing their actual experiences working with me. I had timestamps. I had metadata. I had the original versions of every document Victor had manipulated. He's been building this for 18 months, I said. Not overnight. Not impulsively. This was strategic professional sabotage designed to destroy my reputation and transfer my client relationships to himself. Victor interrupted. This is paranoid fantasy. Heather has been struggling with this account for over a year. I have documentation. You have documentation you created, I said. I have documentation that existed before you decided to betray the colleague who trained you. I pulled up the metadata comparison. Victor's evidence showed file creation dates from months ago, but the actual metadata revealed they'd been created within the last 8 weeks. He'd made exactly the kind of mistake an inexperienced forger would make. He changed the visible dates but left the underlying file properties untouched. "This is technical manipulation," he said quickly. "Anyone could have altered those files." The IT forensics report is on page 47 of your packet. Whitmore's own systems confirm the original creation dates. Your evidence is fabricated. Mine is authentic. Patricia Okonkwo's expression had shifted from neutral to something much colder. "Victor, you told us you had comprehensive documentation of Heather's performance issues." "I do. She must have tampered with the systems. Our IT director ran this analysis independently, at my request, before this meeting." The room went silent. Victor's composure finally cracked. His hands were shaking. His voice rose. "I was trying to protect the firm. Heather's been coasting for years, taking credit for work I was doing, using her relationship with Gregory to maintain an account she'd stopped servicing properly." "Stop," Patricia said quietly. "Just stop." Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should table this discussion and conduct a more thorough—" "Richard." Patricia's voice was ice. "You've been copied on Victor's reports for the past year, reports that appear to be fabricated. We'll be discussing your role in this separately." I watched Victor's face as he realized what was happening. The betrayal had backfired. The scapegoat had become the accuser. Everything he'd built to destroy me was now destroying him. For one moment, just one, I felt something like satisfaction. Then I looked at the man I had trained for 4 years. But I wasn't even sure who this man really was. The man I'd trusted with my clients, my strategies, my professional reputation. The man who'd smiled at me every morning while systematically planning my downfall. How do you mourn a friendship that never really existed? I still don't have an answer to that question. The satisfaction curdled into something more complicated. I'd built this. Not the betrayal, but the betrayer. I'd given him every tool he needed, and he'd used them against me. Was there a moment I could have seen it coming? A warning sign I'd ignored? Or had he always been this way, and I'd simply refused to see it because I wanted to believe the best in someone I'd invested so much in? I still don't have answers to those questions, and I'm still reckoning with myself about all of this. "The board will need time to review the full documentation," Patricia said. "But based on what we've seen today, I think we can all agree that significant personnel decisions need to be made. Victor, you're suspended effective immediately, pending full investigation. Richard, we'll be scheduling a separate conversation about oversight failures." "Heather," she paused, "we owe you an apology." "I don't need an apology," I said. "I need my accounts back." I got them back. All of them. Northeast Regional, Mount Sinai, 3 other healthcare systems that had been quietly transitioned to Victor's portfolio. In case, Gregory Holt called me personally to apologize for doubting me, even briefly. "He was so convincing," he said. "Professional, concerned, I really thought he was worried about you." "He was very good at being convincing," I said. "I taught him that." Victor was fired 3 days after the board meeting. The investigation revealed all aspects of his deception. For 18 months, he had systematically tampered with evidence, manipulated relationships, and carried out deliberate sabotage. He had even applied for my position before my alleged performance issues were officially documented, indicating that this was not opportunism, but a long-planned action. He had consciously chosen to do all of this. There was no moment of weakness, no desperate mistake. Just cold, calculated ambition wearing the mask of loyalty. Richard Calloway retired 6 weeks later, his departure framed as a planned transition, rather than the forced exit everyone knew it was. He'd been too eager to believe Victor's narrative, too willing to sacrifice a high performer to avoid asking uncomfortable questions. The firm offered me his position. Managing partner of Whitmore Strategic Partners, the role I'd been working toward for 7 years. I turned it down. "I don't understand," Patricia said when I gave her my decision. "This is everything you wanted." "You're right. That's exactly what I wanted," I agreed. But then a lot happened. For example, I spent 3 months trying to prove my innocence at a company ready to ruin my career based on fabricated evidence. And while a trusted colleague systematically betrayed me, I watched my mentor look the other way. Heather, please believe we're doing everything we can. We're implementing new oversight procedures, for example. I guarantee this won't happen again. It won't happen to me again, because I won't be here. I took a job at Meridian Healthcare Consulting, a smaller firm with a reputation for ethical practice and transparent leadership. The pay was slightly less. The prestige was significantly lower, but none of that mattered because I was at peace. When I walked into my new office on my first day, I didn't have to wonder if my colleagues were documenting every conversation for future use against me. Don't you think that's worth it? Some lessons cost more than money. This one cost me 4 years of misplaced trust. The professional relationship I'd built with Victor taught me something I'd been too naive to understand before. Trust is not a gift you give once. It's a choice you make repeatedly, based on evidence. And when the evidence shows betrayal, walking away isn't failure. It's wisdom. Some days I still wonder if I could have done something differently, seen the signs earlier, protected myself better. But workplace ethics aren't about perfect prevention, they are about appropriate response. I responded appropriately. The documentation saved me. I see Victor occasionally at industry conferences where we both pretend the other doesn't exist. He landed at a small consulting firm in New Jersey, his reputation damaged but not destroyed. He never apologized. I never expected him to. Former colleagues tell me he's competent there. Productive, apparently trustworthy, though I have trouble believing that particular assessment. Some people learn from their mistakes. Some people just learn to hide them better. Gregory Holt followed me to Meridian, along with 4 other clients from my Whitmore portfolio. The accounts are smaller now, but the relationships are cleaner. I know exactly who I'm working with and what they want from me. I still mentor junior consultants. I still teach them to document everything, build relationships, and get agreements in writing. But now I add a lesson I never used to include. Trust is professional, I tell them, not personal. When you trust someone professionally, you're not betting on their character. You're betting on their incentives. When the incentives change, so will the behavior. Your job is to make sure you have receipts for when that happens. One of my new mentees asked me once if I regretted training Victor. To be honest, I've thought about this a lot. I regret not seeing him clearly, I said. But I don't regret the training. Knowledge isn't good or bad, it's just power. What people do with power shows you who they are. He hid who he was from me for a long time. The documentation helped me and others see it clearly. Maybe I could have seen it sooner, but I couldn't have changed who he was. 4 years of mentorship, 18 months of betrayal, 43 seconds of watching everything fall apart and then rebuild stronger, because I'd never stopped doing exactly what I'd always done. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Sometimes our emotions mislead us and we see what we want to see. So trust evidence over emotion, keep receipts, and never assume loyalty is permanent just because you've earned it. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full red file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.